I always knew that whenever we got pregnant, I told Mason, our baby has a purpose. I don't know what it is, but it's something great.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm Mason.
And I'm Savannah.
Yeah, and we're the Kents.
Yeah, we are the Kents. It's hard to think that. Like, it's already been a year.
Yeah, it's been a year. We got married in September. And we originally were supposed to get married in May of 2020.
But we were COVID season.
Yeah, COVID wedding, COVID seasons, unpredictable events, pandemics, great stuff. But but I think it's important to know like how we met or really honestly like where it all began. I think for me it's I growing up grew up in a loving home. My family loved the Lord and taught me from an early age that it was important to love God. And I think my family in general, they struggled in their own right with different things. But at the end of it, finding God at a young age was like super important and really kind of laid the foundation for everything to come. And then for Savannah, like Savannah's has the most incredible testimony and story.
Yeah, so I'm actually like what you would call a military brat. So my dad was in the Army and I was actually born in Texas. So I will always claim that. So what Mason is referring to is I was actually born with liver disease. It was called biliary atresia. So I had my first surgery whenever I was 5 weeks old, and it was called the Kasai procedure. And basically, they created like a common bile duct to help all the toxins drain out of my liver and give me a better quality of life. And so I was sick off and on my whole life, and I was 17 with bilateral brain damage, a biliary drain, like that was keeping me alive at the time. And I had just graduated high school. 2 weeks later, I had a liver transplant. So it was really like a crazy whirlwind during that time. I was at my absolute sickest. So just to think back, that was in 2014. And at that time, Mason had actually began praying for his future wife.
Yeah.
So in January of 2014, he started a prayer list of everything he wanted in a wife. And at that time, I was at my sickest.
Yeah.
So it's really amazing just how like our timelines have really added up. And he actually read that list to me whenever he proposed, and it hangs in our wall on our wall today in our living room.
I think I still hold the record for the longest proposal.
Yeah, I think so. It's like 10 minutes long. It was so worth it.
But it was great. I proposed to her at our favorite spot, Rosemary Beach, Florida.
Yeah.
And which is very sentimental to us and means a lot to us. But we actually met. So I'm a physician assistant, and I work for the St. Jude affiliate in Baton Rouge at the Arley Lake Children's Hospital.
Yeah, and I went to college to be a child life specialist. So I volunteered at St. Jude for about a year and a half, and I actually did my child life practicum at Our Lady of the Lake Children's, and that's where I got to know Mason. I was actually... Crazy story, I was cleaning toys in the playroom, and Mason walked by and he was like, "You're doing a great job. I like a clean house." And I was like, "What? What a pickup line."
I don't know exactly where that came from.
And I just responded. I was like, I do more than just clean toys. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, I like her sass."
I went home that day, and at the time I was kind of still living with my parents, and I told my mom, I was like, there's something different about this girl. So, but over the years, we just developed a friendship. Actually invited her to church to come hang out with us, and my friends, and of course my friends all loved her. And I was still kind of teetering a little bit. I was kind of dragging my feet some, but once I knew she's my best friend, and like I tell her today, like, you're my favorite, and always. So, but
we joke about it because he never asked me to be his girlfriend.
He
went straight to asking me to be his wife.
Yeah, she's the only person that I guess I dated that, I decided I was like, no, I'm not going to ask her to be my girlfriend. So I knew I had the heart's intention for her to be my wife, and she literally just far exceeded every expectation of the things that I wrote down and prayed for. And she's an incredible person. And yeah, she's the best. But yeah, so we've been on a journey. So like from there, we got married, or really our first intentions were to get married in May of 2020, and then of course COVID pandemic hit prior to that, and so our wedding got pushed off. And then shortly after that, we had been praying about potentially getting pregnant, and on our hearts, both of us come from families that just adore children and love children, and I honestly, my biggest prayer besides having a wife is having a son or daughter. And so we went into it with the expectation that we were going to start to pray, and to really like seek out God and say, okay, this is our expectation, this is what we're praying for, and this is what we see for our future. And
ultimately, we were praying for God's timing. Like, give us direction on when the time is right, and Lord, we know you'll bless us. And
so we actually, since Savannah's history with having her liver transplant and some of the medications she's on, we decided to seek counsel with maternal fetal, somebody that specializes in difficulty pregnancies potentially. And so
we did that in January of this year. So January 2021.
Yep.
And whenever we spoke with them about me getting pregnant, they were like, you could have this complication, or you may take a little bit longer to get pregnant. Like, don't be discouraged if it takes 6 months to a year. If it doesn't happen in that time frame, it's okay. Like, we'll get you in touch with somebody that can work with you on fertility. And we said, okay, like, we understand that there are complications, but we're going to trust the Lord and his plans ultimately for us. And so at that point we were like, okay, like, in our hearts we felt it was time to start trying to have a baby. And we got pregnant in a month, and we were not expecting that at all.
Not at all.
And so we found out right around Mason's birthday in March that we were pregnant. And we were just so excited.
Secret.
No, I couldn't. Like, the same day I told him.
She tried to wait for my birthday, but she just couldn't.
No.
Which was great. It was an awesome surprise. I cried like a baby. And it just, from there it was us really just putting our faith and trust in God and saying, okay, like, this is your timing, and this evidently wasn't on any doctor's radar. Like, some doctors even told her she may not even get pregnant. And so our biggest prayer, honestly, was for her to get pregnant, to experience pregnancy,
and to have
us to have a healthy baby. And God truly did answer those prayers, I think, in his own way. I think in general it's kind of a sad story we have to tell, but then it's also such a great story, a great testimony, and a testament to really God's faithfulness through all of this.
Yeah, as a child, I didn't even know if I could get pregnant. Right. I knew that as a teenager, they would talk to me, like my doctors would, like, you may not ever have the chance of having a baby, but there are other ways to have a child.
Yep.
And so, like, this far exceeded anything, like, I expected. Yep. So that's what we've been doing. We just really were, like, intentionally praying for our baby, and it was kind of wild. Like, in November of last year, before we ever decided to start trying, I had a dream that I was pregnant with a little boy. And I told Mason that, and he was like, okay. Well, in January, I said, Mason, like, I think we're going to have a November baby. Sure. And he was like, we'll see. Like, we'll see. And that's before, again, we ever started trying. And January, like, goes by. I said, I think we're going to get pregnant in February. Like, I just feel it. Like, it's going to happen. I had another dream that I had a little boy. And I said, I really think, like, we're going to get pregnant in February, and we're going to have a boy. Well, that's exactly what happened. Like, we got pregnant in February, and then we found out in May that we were going to have a little boy.
Yep. I was super happy. That day was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big surprise to me. She kept me guessing all week long. I was like, oh, it's a girl. I know it's a girl, because, like, she said this, or she did this, and
I did let it slip, but then I covered it up.
She covered it up. Like, she really did. She did a great job covering it up, because I was like, oh, man.
He was totally convinced.
I was like, oh, no, you said it's a boy. I'm like, no, it's a girl. I think it's a girl. She's just tricking me.
I love you, baby Reese, and I kept you a secret for 1 whole week. That's the only secret I'll ever keep.
Yeah.
yeah, but we had all our friends and family over. You know, we went and started to tell everybody, and that was super fun. And you know, the reactions from, you know, our parents, or both sides of the family were just super happy and joyful. And then I think the biggest response or biggest reaction came from my football, Jimmy Joe, and
It was the funniest.
He couldn't believe it. And then
well, when
he
we
looked
announced our pregnancy, he thanked us.
Yeah,
it was so
he
sweet.
literally kissed Savannah and said thank you. Thank you. And then on the day whenever we found out that it was a boy, he was so excited and super excited. And you know, I think everybody involved, like whether it's our family or friends, everybody was just super pumped for us and this season, because we, out of our friends and out of our family, we were kind of like, I guess, the late bloomers in life, you know, getting married a little bit later on in life. And you know, well, I guess not necessarily for you.
Not for me. I'm the young one.
She's 25, but yeah, for me,
I keep him young.
I guess the expectation was, you know, get married young and then start having a family and start having kids. But like God's timing again, and all of this has been perfect. There's no way I would have met Savannah any other way than at the St. Jude Clinic. There's honestly no other person that truly understands me like she does.
And I feel the same way. Like, I don't even work in the field I graduated college in.
Right.
And it's so funny. My mom is always telling me, you know, Savannah, I think you really may have gone into this field so you could meet Mason. And I'm like, Mom, I honestly think you're right. You know, like, I think this all was perfectly aligned for us to meet exactly how we did.
And I think it's true that, you know, God does truly have a plan and a purpose for everything. I mean, he really does. And so whether it's the outcome that you think or whether it's not the outcome that you hoped for, you know, there's still purpose and there's still a bigger plan in all of it. And so, you know, it's kind of the start of our story.
Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm excited. I could see it in my head already.
You're too much.
I'm telling you, I can see it. So.
I think it'll do like his heart so good.
I'm like, oh my gosh, keep going. I can like listen to this one.
Wait, no, I didn't get the twirl. What are you doing?
So today is our first appointment, and we don't know how far along we are, but we're super excited. Say hey, Miss.
Having a baby.
We are. So excited.
So, back in January of 2021, 2021 is when we started, you know, trying to have Reese, and you know, just really excited and pumped up. We actually just got back from like a trip.
Yeah, we went to Disney.
Yeah, we went to Disney World. I brought her for like the first time since she was like 4, and we had her just a blast being kids again. That was a lot of fun. And so, you know, we didn't really tell anybody that we were trying, and honestly the expectation of it was just us praying about like, hey, you know, we know the Lord has put this on our heart, and we know that we want to be parents and we want the opportunity to you know, have a son or a daughter. And so we actually met up with some of Savannah's doctors and really talked to them about, I guess, the expectations. And you know, at first, you know, we have kind of heard that it would be difficult for Savannah to get pregnant, like, or don't be surprised if she doesn't get pregnant. I can't even get pregnant. Right. And so the expectations leading up to that was, you know, was just us to be prayerful. And we actually, our intentions were really, I guess, pure, you know, talking to the doctor in that aspect, saying, you know, we believe that this can happen, and we don't know when, but we don't know when exactly, or don't know how long it would actually take us. The Lord will give us a child. We don't know which way or how long we will have to wait, but we know it will come. So about a month later is when, like, you started to, I guess, figure out that you were pregnant?
Yeah, so actually it was
2 months.
It was
sorry,
in
2
March,
months.
right
Yeah.
around Mason's birthday. I think I was 2 days late, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think this could be. But I'm like, no way, this isn't happening that quick. And so I took a pregnancy test that morning before I left for work, and it came back with a question mark. And I'm like, what does that mean, Lord? And I just laughed. I was like, you're playing games with me today. Like, I know you're picking at me. And so I went to work, and then I'm on the way home, and I call my sister, and I'm like, hey, Mads, so I took a test, and it came back with a question mark. I don't really know what that means. Like, do you think I should take another one? And Mason was heading home from work, and I'm like, oh my gosh, well, if he is, like, heading home, like, I want it to be a surprise. Like, I want to tell him on his birthday. So I took another pregnancy test, and not 2 minutes later, the, like, positive pregnancy test was longer. I mean, not longer. It was darker than the control line. I'm like, okay, I'm really pregnant. And so Mason and I go on a walk, and he was like, what are you so smiley about? I'm like,
She was just, grinning ear to ear.
I'm
I was like, I knew
absolutely
something was up.
nothing. I was like, I'm just so happy
was
that
like,
we
are
get
you
to go on a
sure?
walk today together. Like, we both had a great day. And he was like, nope, there's something going on. You're not telling me.
Yeah.
And I cannot tell a fib. I really can't. And so we get home, and he goes and takes a shower, and while he's doing that, I'm like scurrying around. I'd already gotten some books that were like nighttime prayers that I wanted to read over our baby once we were pregnant. And I got them in January, and I was like, I'm going to have these for just in case one day we find out we're pregnant, and I want to surprise Mason. So I was like, there's no way I'm waiting until his birthday. And so he comes out, and I sit him down in the chair, and I'm like, okay, like, I wanted to give you an early birthday present. Like, you tried to run your surprise and get it out of me, so here it is. And I hand him the little bag, and he pulls it out, and it was a birthday card that said, happy birthday, Daddy, I can't wait to meet you. And I had the pregnancy test in there. And his face that day, he was just like what? He was so shocked and in disbelief.
I guess going from doctors telling us that it wasn't going to happen to all of a sudden, like, it's literally a month and a half later and we're pregnant. So it was crazy, unbelievable to even be in that situation. And I was shocked.
He definitely was shocked. I was just so excited.
Happy, but
I was
shocked.
Sweating because I was just so excited, and I knew I couldn't keep it a surprise for very long.
I think it's just so natural for, like, I don't know, like a dad to go into dad mode, like, oh my goodness, like, oh, we're pregnant. Like, okay, so what's the next step? Like, I got to do this, I got to do that. I got to get everything in order and organized and ready. And that's the type of person I am. Like, I have to be on my toes.
He has to be prepared. And little do we know, like, this pregnancy is nothing we could have prepared for.
I think at the end of the day, if we had to sum it all up, it was just God teaching me that I was not in control of anything, and learning how to let go of control in my life, because every single thing since I was little has been me controlling every aspect, or at least thinking I was in control of every aspect. Going into, like, us being pregnant, like, I guess not right away, but, like, the first trimester, like, was fine. It was
everything
okay.
was wonderful.
Everything was great.
He was meeting, like, all of his milestones. He was actually a little bit bigger.
Yeah, we were really
He should have been at that point. Everything just looked great. He was doing wonderful, and then I got to the point where I had to go get an iron infusion because I was, like, blacking out.
Yeah.
And
so
then
having lots of problems like that.
Yeah, ever since that, everything just went wrong. And it was 13 weeks, and I started spotting, and then the spotting turned into I was bleeding. And so after that, we saw that, my fluid levels looked kind of down, and they were like, oh no, like, everything's fine. So it was just kind of like,
I think that's
back and forth.
The hardest part was we kept getting told that everything was fine. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. Like, don't worry about it. Go home.
After the very first bleeding accident, I'd called the hospital, like the on-call doctor, and she was like, you need to practice mindfulness. Nothing's wrong. And
that
like,
really upset me.
through his story, I pray that we just bring awareness to people that are hurting and experiencing parenthood for the first time or pregnancy for the first time, and just being more vulnerable and personable with others.
Yeah.
But yeah, at 13 weeks it all started, and it just continued to get worse. And then after that, I was put on like restricted activity. I was not supposed to walk a lot, and I had
drinking gallons of water every day.
I would drink a gallon of water thinking that would help my fluid levels every day, and that.
And she's not one to just lay down and do nothing.
Yes,
so
I got
making her like sit still and be calm and
yes, I
not
was
do
like,
anything was really,
I'm
really
so
tough.
healthy, and I felt fine. That it was very hard, but at the end of the day, I was just thinking I will do anything, to help my baby have a better chance. And I went into another appointment, and I told my OB, I said, I know something's wrong. I know y'all are saying nothing is wrong, but in my heart, I know something is not right, but I'm going to use my baby to honor the Lord however long I get to be pregnant with him, and however long I get to be his mom.
And that was from the get-go. Like, we decided that no matter what, like, because, I mean, I think it was always in the back of our mind, like, something wasn't quite right.
Yeah, you
like
always hear, like, if you have spotting in the
like
first trimester,
that's
like,
terrible. Like,
it's usually not a good thing, and it gets better. And for mine to start at 13 weeks, whenever I had no problem before, it was just a red flag.
And I'll be honest in saying, like, I thought it was my fault. Like, to be honest with you, like, we got through the first trimester and everything was fine, and then, of course, life happens and different stuff like that, and then, she starts bleeding, and then you kind of add up the story, like, hey, this happened then, and it's my fault.
That was really hard.
Yeah, but I think at that point, though, we both, our continued prayer was, of course, for healing and for...
And whatever was going on.
To resolve and to be fine. And then every single time we would go back, it would kind of be one thing after another until we got to
17 weeks, and I went in for another ultrasound, and at that point, like, High Risk was doing an anatomy scan on him, and they saw he had it looked like a tail to me, like it never like went away. And he ended up having spina bifida, which I was like, okay.
We were like, okay.
I was like, this is something we can fix in utero,
Yeah.
better his chances. And then they're like, all right, let's go sit and discuss this and what our options may look like. And whenever we got into the room with my high-risk doctor, she said, Savannah, I just want to let you know his heart is actually pushed over to the left in his chest. And he has a diaphragmatic hernia, so all of his intestines, his liver, and everything were pushed through this hernia, through his diaphragm, and they were actually in his chest, and that would not allow his lungs to grow. And so after that, I didn't know what to think. They said, well, we're going to get you in, like, at our facility and do another urgent ultrasound tomorrow and determine if we need to do an amniocentesis to find out what's wrong.
Yeah.
So.
And actually, I was on FaceTime during this time because it's work and stuff, and I guess leading up to it, like, the expectation was, hey, okay, this is normal, everything's fine. Yes, you're bleeding or having these issues, but everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, everything's not fine.
Not fine.
And so, from there, they wanted to do, was it the very next day?
Yeah, the very next day we had our urgent ultrasound.
And the reason why I say that is because literally from that point, like, everything is a blur to me.
Yeah.
Like, everything.
So we met with, like, the director of the high-risk department.
Yeah.
And he, first they told me, like, your husband needs to be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, he has patients, and they said, he needs to be there tomorrow. I just think he needs to be there to support you. And thank God, because the next day we found out, like, our son had less than 1% chance of living.
Okay.
And that was hard because our whole pregnancy, we were told everything was fine. And like just the day before, we thought we had a chance, like a fighting chance, that we could do surgery for the spina bifida and like this hernia could be repaired. And once they saw like his liver was actually in his chest as well, they told us like there was no chance, like he would have less than 1% chance, even if he was born alive, like he would have no chance of being put on ECMO because he would have no lungs because of all of his organs being in his chest. And we just asked them to be like 100% upfront and honest, like what does this look like for our baby? And we just walked out of there. I was numb. I don't think I've ever cried harder in my life.
I don't know, just there but not there.
Yeah.
Like
and
I was really...
the next day, we called Sister Dulce. She is like my spiritual mentor, and she was before my transplant, through my transplant, after. And I asked if we could please get in with her. And so I went in the next day, and she prayed over Reese in my womb, and he was still alive. Like, just keep that in mind. Like, he was still moving,
still
his
moving,
heart was still
was
beating. Like, he was still growing. He was just tiny. And she blessed him in my womb and baptized him. And she looked at me, she said, Savannah, you're going to have to suffer now so your baby doesn't have to suffer in the future. And that resonated with me. Like, I didn't want my son to suffer. If I could take any of that away from him, I would have in a heartbeat. And so she prayed over us on that Wednesday. So Monday, I found out something is terribly wrong. Tuesday, I found out like our son wasn't going to live. Wednesday, I had him baptized by Sister Dulce. And then on Thursday, I was home. I was still on limited activity. And it was around, I would say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, that was home too.
I started cramping. Well, you're still at work, and I had to call you.
That's right, yeah, you did call me. I came home.
And I started cramping, and I just was like, this is not the same. I hadn't been cramping the whole pregnancy, other than if I walked too much. And so something changed, and then I started like passing fluid, and the cramping just continued. So I called the on-call doctor at the hospital, and they said, well, we can't really see you, so we need you to come into labor and delivery just in case you're in labor. And I called Mason. He racked up his last patient, and then he met us at labor and delivery. And sure enough, I got in there, they did an ultrasound, and I was already contracting. So Reese I felt him move. I felt like a flutter, and that was the very first time I ever felt him. And he was actually getting in position for me to have him. And he had actually been tucked in my my hip,
right side.
On my right side in my hip. He didn't have the strength to really move too much because of his spina bifida. And so for me to feel him, that little flutter for the first time was actually my body saying, okay, it's time. And our sweet baby, he was not ready at all. He was still moving. So I get in labor delivery. They see that I'm contracting. And then after that, they said, well, you're not dilating at all. So I think you'll be fine if you want to go home. I didn't want to be there.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I didn't want to be there. I was like, I would like to go home. And Mason said, absolutely not. Like,
nope.
You're not having him at home. Like, that's traumatic. We're not doing that. And our midwife that happened to be there, she said,
she fought for
she
us.
said, oh no, you're staying here. Like, I feel more comfortable being able to lay eyes on you if you need anything. You're in the right place. And thank God we did, because not a few hours later, I was contracting every 2 to 4 minutes. I could not get comfortable. I had refused pain meds because I thought he's tiny, everything's going to be okay. And after that, they determined that in the next morning. So I went into labor on Thursday. On Friday that morning, they determined they were going to transfer me to their larger hospital in New Orleans so I could do an amniocentesis to find out what's wrong with him. So if we wanted to have a future baby, he would give us a little insight as to what we might need to look for and if this is hereditary and things like that. So we get there, they transported me by ambulance. Got there, I had started dilating by that point, and then they went ahead, gave me an epidural so I wouldn't have to fill the needles for the amnio. And they came in to do the amnio. Reese was still moving. He was moving so much that they had to go in on the other side because they couldn't get the amount of fluid that they needed because he was in the way and moving all around. And whenever they took out the fluid, I asked 100 questions because I'm very interested.
That's a lot of questions.
I do.
They're good.
And because those things are happening to me. So they take these needles, they're
about that big.
Probably this long, and they go into your stomach and they extract fluid. So they did that, I think, 3 times.
Yep.
And then whenever he finally got enough fluid, I asked the doctor, does that look normal to you? And he said, I'm going to be honest, it does not. It looks like that it is contaminated with blood and you had a chronic placental eruption that was not caught. And
which would explain the bleeding.
Yeah,
The
whole time I had a chronic eruption, and apparently that is both fatal to the mom and the baby. And so to hear those words that I had that, it blew me away. We had no idea this whole time. So all of that happened, and then they gave me some medication vaginally to help me start dilating more because my body was not ready. It was not happening. I was contracting, but my body wasn't ready to actually let him go, and he wasn't either. So they gave me some medicine, and then they came and checked me a few hours later, and I had only dilated a little bit. So they gave me more medicine, and then Mason and I were settling down. It was around like 9:30 that night. So I'd been laboring like well over 24 hours. And I looked at Mason and I said, I need to listen to the song about the wind. And he said, no, Savannah, like, you need to go to sleep. You need to rest. I hadn't slept in like a while.
Like 3 days.
Yeah. And I was like, no, I have to hear the song about the wind. And it was Fresh Wind. Who sings it?
By Hillsong.
Hillsong? Yeah, Fresh Wind by Hillsong. And he comes over there and we listen to Fresh Wind. And during that time, I'm just worshiping the Lord. And I get this rush of heat over my body. Like from my head to my toes, I had a full rush of heat. And I looked at Mason. He was sitting next to me. And I said, it's going to be okay. I feel okay and at peace now. And I firmly believe that was the Holy Spirit coming over me and entering into that room and into that moment and into our situation. And I just had overwhelming peace and something so tragic. And then after that, we read the nighttime prayer book to Reese. And that's what we had read every night while I was pregnant since he could hear. And we read that book. And after that, the doctor came in to check me again, and Reese had actually already entered the birth canal. And they came in, and I said, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit of pressure now. And he was there. He was ready. And so they ended up delivering him. And it was really rare. He came out in his gestational sac still, which they were like, that typically doesn't happen. So that was really hard to see him like that. And Mason baptized Reese in that moment. And the room just stood still.
Yeah, nobody moved.
And then after that, we held him just a few moments. And then they took Reese to go clean him up. And then they did little pictures of him, like of his full body. Because he looked like a beautiful baby. And then they did these pictures of his feet, which we have in our home, and I get to look at him every day. His second toe was bigger than his big toe, just like Mason's. I'm like, you already have your daddy's feet. How is that possible? And actually, Mason got me a necklace with the little ring that is on Reese's foot, and I wear it every day just to have him with me. And so, yeah, it was a whirlwind. And then after that, they brought him back to us, and I held him for a few hours. And actually, my placenta, like, part of it came out with Reese, and the other part got stuck. So they tried to, like, physically pull out the retained placenta, and it didn't come out. And so that was terribly painful. So then they gave me more medicine to help me try to labor longer and deliver the retained placenta. And that didn't happen either, so I had to go in to have a DNC and get the rest of that out. And I spiked a fever. It was a lot. And then after that, my liver took a hit. So we had a bit of a bumpy road. But once I came out of surgery, I just held Reese, and my sister, Mason, had shut down. He was shaking. The nurses had to go sit him down before he passed out. It was bad. And so whenever I came back from surgery, I laid in bed with him, and I cradled him. I just laid back, and I could look at him, but like I could have that peace of just holding my baby. And my sister came and sat by me and just cradled my hand. So if I happened to fall asleep, she would be there to help support him and me. And I remember I woke up. I think I dozed off for a little while, and I woke up and I was like, this didn't just happen.
Yeah.
I was confused as to what was going on. I didn't realize I even had him, that I had just come back from surgery. And I think I was in just such shock.
Yeah.
That
for sure.
it just happened so fast. And then after that, I had to give him up. I had to give them to the nurses to go. They were going to do an autopsy, and we asked them to please not. And so we allowed them to do imaging to confirm that he did have a hernia and he had spina bifida. So we allowed them to do all of those things. And then once I handed him over, like I didn't get to see him again. And that was really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then they moved us to like a post-birth unit. And they brought me a teddy bear that they had with him. And they brought me like the things that he was wrapped in.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually have that in here. Mason,
Yeah,
you have his
nice.
little pouch.
Yeah.
So this is his little pouch that they had him wrapped in. The hospital gave it to us, actually. So this was his little pouch. Just think he fit in this tiny little pouch. He was a little over 6 inches. And in utero, he was 5 ounces. But by the time we had him, he was only 2.5. He was so tiny. And then we had him wrapped in his little burp cloth with his name on it. Sweet baby. And so now we keep those in his little keepsake box.
Those are his pictures.
Yeah, his pictures the hospital did of him.
But yeah, it's crazy to think that all that happened in just such a short period of time.
Yeah. From a Monday, we were told, like, terrible news.
Yeah.
Tuesday, the
Yeah.
worst. And then on Friday, we were having him.
Yeah. And in full transparency, like I said, I was there, but I just wasn't there. I think more than anything, my heart broke that, number one, I had to see my wife go through all of this. And this was not the expectation I had of things that were going to happen. And then, like, told my son in a way that, again, it was kind of a shock and all situation where I was like complete shock that like I'm holding my son and you know he looks like a baby, but at the same time like she had kind of prepared for the expectations of what he may look like and I did not. And so like seeing him in that state, like I don't know, I just felt like completely surreal. But one of my friends kept telling me, like, he's like, you're never gonna understand like true love until you have the love that the Father has for us, and that aspect of like seeing your son or your daughter or whatever, and whether that's natural means or not natural means, but to be able to hold him, but at the same time, like, I don't know, I just kept picturing, God looking at his son the way he did. And I do believe in part, like, they kind of told us a little bit later that a lot of the movement and stuff that Reese had was probably because he just never could get comfortable, and that broke me. Like, to know that he was maybe in potentially like some pain. But I think more than anything, I struggled with too. Like, when the doctors talked to us about his diagnosis and what was going on, they had mentioned to us about, like, they tried to set some expectations of what was going to happen. Like, either this is going to potentially happen naturally, but we don't know how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
Or B, you guys can make a decision right now to terminate pregnancy. And I'll be honest with you, I went home and I struggled so hard with that. Like, not the fact that, like, my heart was telling me that the correct, right response was, no, like, we're going to see this through. Like, we're going to pray, and like, we're like, this may be the next miracle. And then,
And we firmly believed the Lord could heal him.
100%. But at the same time, the expectation as a father, as a husband, is first and foremost to take care of your family. And so knowing that she was going through all this, and like, she could potentially like even die from this, like, I'm thinking to myself, is that the right decision? Is that the right move? And I talked to a couple of people about it and really struggled with that. And at the end of the day, honestly, what felt right was to pray for God's will to be done in it. And so our prayer, it was a morbid prayer, but it was saying, like, God, if this is going to happen and he is going to not, live, I guess, which he was living, but here, take him and take him peacefully, or heal him here, or heal him up in heaven. And honestly, like, after we prayed that, like, that's when she started going into labor. And so right then and there, I had a peace about knowing that, like, God was making the decision and we weren't making the decision, which again, I struggled with a lot during the whole pregnancy, every single bit of the way. Because again, in the back of my mind, I kept going, this is not right. But at the same time, I would tell Savannah, like, okay, I only want to know these details.
Yeah.
I don't want to know these details, because coming from a medical background, it's so hard for me to separate, that side of me, And so, and I try to be 100% consistently me throughout my job or throughout here at home or whatever it may be. But at the same time, I had never went through anything like that ever in my entire life. And so the expectation of what was to come was just not there for me. And so again, as a person, an A-type personality that needs to know the steps of what's going to happen, everything went out the window.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm so thankful for Savannah and for her. Just, I'm telling you, from like the time that we got the diagnosis of like, hey, this is what's happening with Reese, and this is the chance of survival and this and that. Like, emotionally, yes, like, you were wrecked just as much as I was, but at the same time, like, you were strong for us both.
I would do it again.
I know you.
I would, like,
I know you would.
I would do it again tomorrow. Just having the experience of being pregnant with him and that bond that we shared being pregnant, and like us and then me with Reese, it's just indescribable.
Yeah, like
I don't know, it's just different.
Yeah.
I always knew that whenever we got pregnant, I told Mason, our baby has a purpose. I don't know what it is, but it's something great. He's like, yeah, I know, Savannah. I think so too. And I said, no, Mason. I said, there's more. Like, I know we all have purpose. I said, but there's something so great that I don't even understand that's his purpose. And looking back at it, I'm like, Lord, I see you.
Yeah.
I see how you're going to use our baby just to glorify you, but also bring awareness to others that have experienced grief, others that experience just the loss, you know.
Here's wind chime.
I hear his wind chime outside too. And so, yeah, and after that, we also experienced more trauma. So we didn't get our amnio back for a few weeks.
And I think before you go into that part, like just to say that in every aspect of story, I think you have the good, the bad, the ugly, and we're telling the story because we feel that Reese's legacy is to have an impact and change not only maybe some of the processes that go on in the hospital setting, but also like outside of a hospital setting, just in general with handling grief and loss. And it's something that we're not necessarily taught. I think empathy and sympathy are things that you know, I think empathy maybe is something that not everyone has, but I think, and sometimes like if you go through a situation, like you don't actually have that much empathy or sympathy for another human being unless you've probably been through that experience as well. But on the flip side of that, I think that by sharing these stories and sharing these things, like people could look at situations and, you know, slip on their shoes, and say like, hey, this is what this family's going through. And that's something that I do daily now. Like I had that for my patients and my, the people that I was surrounded with, but it did not 100% fully click or resonate with me until we lost Reese. So
even our nurse that came in to help deliver him, she had never delivered a stillborn.
I can't tell you how many people.
She walked in the room and I said, I heard it's your first time experiencing
Savannah was like coping, like helping her cope with it.
But I wanted her to understand, like, we're going through something tragic and traumatic, but she was as well. Like, as a nurse going through this for the first time, I was like, I see you. I know you've never experienced this before, but I want you to know, like, I'm glad you're going through this with us.
And
like,
that doesn't even surprise me that you would even do that.
But still, like,
that's just who she is. She's always looking out for the other person. Like she could be going through the worst situation in her entire life, and she's like, "Are you okay?"
It concerned me. Like, that changes you. And
she did
it changed us, but
she did come in like a deer in the headlights. Like she had this look on her face, like I don't know exactly what I'm stepping into, but it gets me emotional just thinking about it, because I know that when she stepped in the room, like she could tell, like it was a different atmosphere. I firmly believe that, like, with prayer and petition and like all the times that we spent praying, like either for healing or for healing here or healing up there, it was changing the atmosphere of that place.
Yeah.
And so, like, whenever, like, she walked in, like, anybody that walked through that door, they knew that it was a different change. Their tone changed, their demeanor changed, and, like, we got told several times, like, you guys are different, or y'all are handling this, like, how are y'all handling this, or those kind of things.
At the end of the day, we just we
like,
are broken, but
we know two broken people. But
we know the Lord is going to use this for His glory. We want Him to use our son for His glory. Like, ultimately, we know God paid the price and with His own son, and at the end of the day, like, we want our son just to bring glory back to the Father. And
what's the whole principle of taking any bad situation, like, and I talked about this at church on Sunday about how the Lord truly can take any situation and he can get the glory out of it. He can get the honor out of it. He can, no matter how bad or ugly it looks, he can take that situation and make it something beautiful. And like, you know, the whole principle of turning, you know, ashes into beauty, like, you know, that whole deal. And so that's something that we truly experienced. And, you know, people that do not know God, those people I feel for, because like their situation looks dark and dreary and like there's absolutely no aspect of hope. But those people that do have Jesus, like even though they're grieving, even though they're hurting, even though they do feel broken, like there is that aspect of that light, that hope, that promise, like something to hold onto, an anchor. That's an anchor. Like, and that's something that, you know, like there was 2 songs we actually listened to that night. We listened to Fresh Wind, and the other one was Gyra, and you know, and by Maverick City Music, and I just love that song so much. And there was a part in that song, oh my goodness, what is it? If he watches the lilies, like how much more does he love us? Right. Like, you know, and he, like, talking about just scripturally, like he takes care of like every aspect, and like he has the finest details for all these different things like on this earth, but how much more does he love us? Right. And so, I mean, honestly, like I kind of felt like he was just kind of orchestrating everything. And even though from some people's outside perspective, it looked like maybe the enemy won or whatever that may be, but we knew within our heart like that wasn't true. Like people give him too much credit. That's all I can say. So we knew that God ultimately got the glory out of it, and we knew from the second that we walked into that place, like you said, like he was going to make an impact like on everyone around us. And you still, from that day, got texts and emails and messages from people that we had interacted with that had told us that he, you know, Reese, like impacted their life. And
I had multiple nurses from the first hospital messaged me, and even the ultrasonographer messaged me, saying, you know, we're here for you, but your light is like through your story, you're showing his grace and his light, and I just feel like that's so important.
And I think part of the story again is the ugly part too. There were several different things that happened that, you know, we weren't necessarily happy with. One being that I was going to say Savannah getting sick, number one. And
me getting sick, and then I came home and I started cramping again, and they actually, like, I passed a foreign object. We don't know what it was.
Something.
And then I ended up passing still retained tissues that they didn't get during the DNC, and I had an infection. It was a lot. I was miserable. I had to go back up to the hospital, and they thought they were going to have to do emergency surgery because I still had retained tissue. So at that point, I got given more medicine to go into labor again once being at home.
More sick.
Yeah, so I ended up laboring at home for a couple of days. I was miserable. I just lost our son just a couple of days before. I mean, at that point, I'm being put back into labor and possibly emergency surgery. My liver enzymes shot up, and I've not had anything happen like that since my transplant, so that was alarming. And yeah, it was bad. And then to top it all off, my breast milk came in, and I didn't have a baby to feed, and so
that was tough.
I'm emotional now. It was hard. All of it at one time, and I finally finished passing everything. And I had, before we left the hospital, let me go back. We signed all the paperwork to release Reese from to the funeral home from the hospital. And that was terrible.
That was an experience in itself.
And we ordered,
the person that came in to kind of get that process started, actually, no, I'm sorry. It was the pastoral care or chaplain who came into our room and was like, well, I hear you'll need some prayer. And like, we're like, wait, time out. Like, do you know what happened? And she starts asking this question, like, why we're here. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, okay. Like, she had no idea. And once we did, she just kind of...
she stood there. She went...
She didn't know what to say. So in part,
then had to leave the room.
Yeah.
It was really sad.
Yeah. So in part, we were understanding. We were like, okay, I'm sorry that you didn't know. Like, again, she's comforting somebody else, like, through this process, going like, I understand. It's okay. We're gonna be okay. Like, that kind of thing.
I know it's a lot to take in. We were the same way.
Like, you know, and so, but, you know, that the paperwork and stuff we got started, we signed, like, we had it ready. Like, again, like, we
decided to get Reese cremated, so we ordered him an urn before we even left the hospital.
Which,
and so
who knows, you could order an urn off of
I did not even
the internet, but
and so
here we are, like, just lost our baby and had to kind of decide those things, and that was horrific in itself. But
fast forward, I'm home. I'm sorry, I forgot to talk about that earlier. So I'm home. I'm finally sleeping. It had been several days, and I had finished laboring everything. Yeah. I ended up not needing emergency surgery, so that was great.
Like, everything was settling down to a degree.
And I asked Mason, I said, can you please come lay down with me for a little bit? And he said, okay, well, I'll be there in just a little bit. You go lay down and rest, and I'll meet you in there. So I go lay down, and I'm, like, fall straight asleep.
Yeah. So she was finally sleeping, like, finally out, and so happy about that. And I decided to call the funeral home because it had been some time since I heard from them, and they were great. They were wonderful. Like, they kind of talked us through A and Z, and, like, honestly, they were just like, look, just give us the details of the hospital, the name, your wishes, and we'll take care of it.
And we brought his urn to the funeral home, like, right after we got home.
They're like, we're going to take care of it. And so I called back up there, and they were like, well, we don't have his body. And I was like, well, what do you mean? This has been it was six days. They said, well, we called up at the hospital, and they said that the family had not released the body. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, like, no, like, I signed all that paperwork. We turned that paperwork into the appropriate people. We made sure over and over and over again, covering all my steps. It's just the type of person I am. And so I called up there to talk to, the people that were in charge of the ward or the unit. And I ended up getting pastoral care, which, because they were in charge of taking over, and the chaplain was supposed to make sure all this stuff was taken care of. Well, I get on the phone, and then at first, and it was the person that we had dealt with the first time, the deer in the headlights lady, and she's very, very nice, very sweet lady. But I said, this is the dad of Reese, Kent, and I called the funeral home. They said they don't have the body. And she told me, well, the family didn't sign the paperwork. I said, I'm sorry, but you were talking to the family. I most certainly did sign the paperwork. I said, not to be offensive, I just need to speak to someone else. And so she got someone else on the phone. Well, sir, the family didn't sign the paperwork. I said, I can assure you that I signed the paperwork. We did all the necessary things. We coordinated with the funeral home. Comes back, oh, well, y'all didn't tell us the name of the funeral home. I said, I just told you that we told you the name of the funeral home. This is the person that you contact. I got the name, the number, everything under control.
And we already filled out the paperwork with all that information.
Comes back again. Well, sir, we're going to have to call you back. And I was like, why? He said, because we don't know where he is. And my heart stopped. Like, number one, my first thought was my poor wife, who is literally in there after all this ordeal, is sleeping finally. And I have got to tell her that they don't know where our Reese is. We get a phone call back later, And it's one of the head nurses of the ward, and she told me herself that they are trying to locate where he is. Again, not making me feel any better about this. So then, actually, I think an hour or two passed by, and she was still sleeping at this point. I did not wake her up. They finally called me back and said that they located him and that he's been in the bereavement room, locked in the closet in a container. Like, he's been there the whole time. And so, Savannah finally got up, and
I went outside. My mom and him were sitting in the rocking chair.
And I told
I looked at Mason and I said, "You lied to me." And he was like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "You didn't come lay down with me." And he said, "Savannah, I need you to come sit down."
Yeah.
And at that point, I said, "Did somebody else die?"
Yeah.
And that was my first thing. I was like, "Did someone else die? Is everyone okay?" And he said, "Savannah, I just need you to sit down." And so I sat down, and he looked at me, and he said, "They lost Reese." And at that point, I don't think I've ever been more angry in my entire life.
I've never seen him more angry in my entire life.
And I'm like, how do you lose somebody's baby? How? And not just us, like, where has he been? He's been by himself. Like, I know he's died, but, like, that's my baby at the end of the day. And, what was bad was in the hospital, they told me that he was in a bucket in the bereavement room waiting to go get scans. And so then at that point, I'm envisioning my son has been in a closet, in a bucket, by himself. Yeah. And nobody has even looked at him. And I've never been angry. I've never been more broken. I still, as you can tell, I struggle with it every day. Still. Like, as his mom, I'm supposed to protect him, and I still struggle and feel like I failed to do that. And so...
And that was something that we had to talk about and process through, because, I kept reminding her that, like, if anything, like, she was the ultimate mom. Like, she did everything that she could do in order to take care of her baby, and this was human error. And
they had said, like, people had walked in and out of there and never questioned, never looked at him, never even wondered, why has this baby been in here for 6 days unaccounted for? And to hear they told him, "Mr. Kent, I don't know where your son is. I'm going to personally go find him."
Yeah.
I was wrecked. It's been 9 months, and I'm still wrecked from losing our son, being told everything was okay, and ultimately, like, he died. And then for me not to protect him, even in, like, those vulnerable hours after he passed away, like, I still struggle with it all the time. Yeah. And since then, they told us that they're going to change their policies to ensure this does not happen to another family. Mm-hmm. And I really pray so. And they actually have asked us to be on the board of, like, the representatives of the families, and for, like, grief and their families and traumas and things like that. And we've thought about it, but ultimately, like, we're just not ready now.
I told Savannah if we had the opportunity to maybe sit down and share the story with them maybe once, and just get that out there, that maybe that would be beneficial. Yeah. But
they ended up being able to locate him.
Thankfully,
somebody actually from the high-risk clinic went and found him.
And she reassured me. She's like, he's here with me. All of those details of that, and
they sent him to the funeral home, and
they did.
At that point, Mason asked my mom to please go identify him, make sure that was actually her son.
I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, and when she walked in the funeral home, he was out, and they had him just laid out in the chapel, and we had no idea that he was there.
No, we had no idea.
Yeah, and so she went and made sure that was our little Reese, and sure enough, it was Reese, and so we ended up having him cremated, and Mason felt like he didn't, if we ever moved, he didn't want to leave him again.
I just felt like she had already felt like, okay, I lost my son, and then lost my son again, and then I just told her, I was like, from a perspective of loss, like I just didn't want her to ever feel like, okay, we're leaving him again, and so, you know, ultimately, like, you know, that's a touchy subject in itself to even talk about that. I think one of the things that upsets me too is the fact that, like, you know, our child, like, you know, is considered, you know, not even considered a stillborn at the point of.
I think at 20 weeks they're considered a stillborn.
And that's something
and I was 18 weeks. So
and that's something that we've struggled with too, because, you know, if you see pictures of him, I mean, he clearly.
I mean, you can look at his tiny feet. Like, his face was completely developed. You could see his little eyes through his closed eyelids.
We were even told at one point, like, you know, like he had auditory canals, like, like through.
Yeah, they said everything was intact.
Like he could hear us, like, and that made me, you know, really happy that he could hear us.
Yeah, because we would sing to him at night or read his books and pray over him, and so we have peace knowing that. And then after everything happened, the funeral home brought his urn to us the next day, which we got a little butterfly for him with his name on it. It's engraved, and then we have a Bible verse, and so we have that out too. So I always get to look at his little urn and see his name and say his name, and then we have his feet that I look at every day and we tell him good night, and we actually have a little lantern next to him, and
yeah, he's got a little nightlight.
Yeah, Mason makes sure it comes on every night so he's not in the dark. Yeah.
I think it's, you know, and some people may look at that and think it's different or strange or whatever it may be, but I think honestly all of us as humans, as, I don't know, just spiritual people, like we'd love to be able to hold on to an aspect of somebody, you know, in one way, shape, or form. One of our closest friends got us a wind chime, and that has been the coolest thing ever. Like, I mean, we love listening to that wind chime.
Yeah.
And
I walked out the other day to let Jude out, and then I was like, okay, Jude, have a good day, and I went to go shut the porch door, like the screen door, and then that wind chime started chiming. I said, okay, bye, Reese, I love you, have a good day. And as soon as I said that, the chime completely stopped.
Yeah.
And so
and this is another
I feel like
thing.
he leaves us just little signs that he's all around.
Yeah, this is a little monkey that one of my coworkers actually had made for us. So it's got his name on it, his birthday, the time that he was born, and so it's just made of different like fabrics that we had picked out.
Yeah, and this is actually like a gown that I had with his name on it.
Yeah. And
then a burp cloth on the bottom with his name. So we have a lot of different things just to, like,
and
I don't know, honor him.
And I think our hope is, you know, that, you know, our next kiddo will be able to have this,
a little
and
part of his brother.
have a little part of his brother, and, you know, just be able to share in that.
Yeah. Well, then we have to talk about, so all along they thought Reese had trisomy 18, which I believe is Edwards.
Yep.
Well, we get a call around 6:30 one evening a few weeks after we had him with the amnio results. And my high-risk doctor called and said, hey, Savannah. And I said, hey, like, I have Mason here with me. And he said, well, he didn't have trisomy 18. He actually had something called triploidy. I said, what is triploidy? Like, y'all never brought this up. And I said, y'all really thought, like, it was trisomy 18. He said, well, like, trisomy 18 has 3 copies of the 18th chromosome. He said, well, Reese had an extra copy of every single chromosome. Mm-hmm. So instead of having 46 chromosomes like everyone, he actually had 69 chromosomes, which it's super rare, less than 1% of all pregnancies in the world. And we were like, we would have the rare one.
We told him, like, we were like, of course.
And yeah, we were like, we knew he was special.
But
yeah,
through that,
so
like, he talked to us, because, I mean, again, the expectation was for us, like, you know, to try again, or in one form or another, and you know, that's how we started this journey.
Yeah. So with triploidy, they told me I was at risk of developing choriocarcinoma, which is a type of cancer, and so. Yeah, after that, they told us we had to wait at least 6 months before we would ever think about trying to get pregnant again. So they actually...
At that point, it would be very, very high risk.
So, yeah, they monitored my HCG levels, which they did go down. But even it was a couple months later, I was still measuring... I think they said at like 14 weeks pregnant.
Yeah, she's still...
Yeah, I like did
had
about
pregnancy symptoms too.
Yeah,
which
I had
very
the
different.
nausea. I had like where I was still like holding on to weight, and then they said my uterus was like this size. It would be at 14 weeks pregnant, and that lasted a while. I mean, like I said, even a couple months after.
Yeah.
And so they would monitor my HCG levels to make sure that they returned to zero, and they did that through January of this year, 2022. And so far, everything has looked great. But
at the end of the day, ultimately, the doctor decided that it's best that she did not get pregnant again. And so, you know, and that kind of...
They would support us if we did. But with all of the complications I had after with my liver and an infection...
Not a good idea.
Yeah. It just wasn't in the best interest of us. And so... Ultimately, after that, we decided to pursue surrogacy to have another baby. And we knew, well, Mason kept saying Reese was our little missing, he gave us that missing puzzle piece to help us have another baby. So through that, we ended up, we went back to church 3 weeks later, and we had been talking about we wanted to do surrogacy, and my mom actually had reached out to a lady that she met on some surrogacy groups located in Baton Rouge, that she had a surrogate for her baby. And so, actually her surrogate was pregnant with her baby for the first time, and we were going to go meet her like that Monday. And so Sunday we go to church, and the person that was on our hearts to be our surrogate actually approached us and asked us, "How are you doing? And I know things are hard, like that might be a silly question, but, you know,
and this is
how are you?"
We prayed about specifically.
Yeah, she was there in labor and delivery the first time, and I had asked my sister, "Hey, is she working?" And sure enough, she actually was working that night. We weren't very close at the time, but I don't know why, and I'm so private of a person.
Yeah,
I just wanted her to be in it.
I was kind of shocked she invited somebody
into that moment. And so she came in, and I told her the story, and she started sobbing, and I felt terrible after that. Like, I felt so bad. But
when she
anyway,
walked away,
after that, after she walked away, we just had a feeling like there was something special about her, and there was going to be something different happening in the future. And so we go back to church 3 weeks after, and that's when our friend asked us how we were doing, and I told her we were going to meet with a lady the next day to discuss surrogacy, and she looked at us and she said, or looked at me and she goes, "I'll have your baby. I'll carry your baby." And I said, "No, I'm being serious." I said, "This is something like we're like really wanting to pursue." And she said, "I know, I'll have your baby." And I said, "What?" And so I grabbed Mason, and he turned around, and I said, "She said she would carry our baby," and he just started sobbing.
Oh yeah, but yeah, I'm teared out thinking
And
about
then she went home to talk to her husband. And
Granted, I was literally staring this woman down the entire church service. Like it was like one of those like, "Oh, Nicole," like, you know, just
the light was just like
I just
beaming
knew.
on her.
I even told her husband later. I was like, "Look, I mean, no offense, but like I was literally staring your wife down the entire service," and I just knew, like, I had this overwhelming like peace about it. Like we had prayed about it. Like I was 100% sure that like she was the person that would do this for us. And like you said, she went home to tell her husband about it, who at first was not on board.
Right,
Just because,
absolutely
again,
not.
and I could see, I put myself in his shoes,
And if she came home and told me the same thing, I'd probably be like, what? Like, you know, like, I don't know about that. But at the end of the day, like, he said, you know, I'm going to fully support you in this. And yeah, like, let's do this. And I think, honestly, like, from the point that she came into the room to the point where you had a conversation, and she's the one that said, you know, she invited herself into that, saying, I will do this for you guys. Like, I kept just thinking of her as this vessel, and God has used vessels many times throughout the Bible. I mean, whether that's, you know, talking about turning water into wine into these cisterns, which are vessels, or, you know, crossing the sea in a boat, which is a vessel, you know,
Right.
are you know, just using so many aspects of, you know, whether it's people, places, or things as vessels to do something for his kingdom. And I was like, she's the one. Like, she's gonna do this. And sure enough, like, that's kind of where all that started.
So we have a 6-year-old named Graham. He's our first boy.
Boy genius.
Boy genius. And then Roslyn is 3, and then Tate is 2.
Graham is going to be a tech wizard. He loves his Nintendo Switch. He loves to draw. He's a very good drawer, a very good builder of Legos. Roslyn is our little princess, loves to dress up and loves to watch Play-Doh videos, to watch people make Play-Doh. Which, I mean, you know, power to you. And Tate is honestly going to be the athlete, I think. So we started dating in September of 2012, and I proposed to her the day after my birthday, March of the next year. So we were only together for about 6 months.
And we got married in December.
And we got married that year.
It's always been on my heart I've always loved being pregnant. I knew I loved being pregnant. I didn't want any kids at all after Tate. Not his fault, just knew it was over.
I mean, you definitely knew it was over.
And then William got a vasectomy. But I've always had like the thought, like, I love being pregnant, I just wouldn't have another kid, you know. But if anybody needed one, I'm here, you know. Like, that's always been my thought. And funny enough, like the Kardashians, I was catching up on them. And she uses a surrogate and all that. And I don't know, it was just like in my mind a lot because of that too. God can use the Kardashians. But I don't know, it was just weird. So,
I never thought anything of it.
I guess I never told you.
No, you definitely did. Like, we've talked about maybe before that. Like, you've talked about loving to be pregnant. I'm like, yeah, it's cool and everything, but, you know, to be pregnant, you have to have a kid.
Right.
And we don't want another kid. You know, and I thought you were crazy because I honestly wouldn't agree to do this, I think, if it was somebody that
I don't think I could do like an agency or anything like that.
Like, it would just be such a different dynamic, I think, than what it is now.
Yeah. And like I said, going through our losses, you know, made us very empathetic and, you know, if we were in that position, we'd want someone to be there for us. So when I was at the hospital, I was working one day and it was at the end of my shift, and Madison messaged me that Savannah was in the hospital and she was only like 17, almost 18 weeks. And I was like, oh no. It's like, why are you in triage? You know? So she's like, can you come see us? I said, yeah, I'm at a stopping point. I can go see you. And so I walked in the room and Savannah's got a big smile on her face. And I was like, hey, how's it going? Why are you here? And so Savannah was like, Mason can tell you. And so Mason was like, the first thing I heard and what I remember is him saying, Reese has a diaphragmatic hernia. And, you know, when I heard that, I was just like, you know, it's almost a death sentence, you know. And then he started talking about the other things. And I turned around because I was like, I don't want them to see me cry. So I bawled in the corner. I was like, I'm so embarrassed. But I just, hugged them and asked, if, they were being taken care of, and told them I would do whatever they needed. If they needed something, and talk to whoever. I knew the doctors, I knew the midwives, let me know. And they were like, okay. And that was really it. I came back after my shift because it was almost over anyway. I was like, do y'all need anything? I love y'all, whatever. And then I went home, checked on them. They were just really on my heart, obviously. So it was like maybe 4 or 5 weeks later when we were in church, and it was probably their first or second Sunday back. But it was my first time back since I'd been working. Like, I work every other weekend, so I can't come every week. So I went straight to Savannah, hugged her, and asked her how she'd been doing. And she's like, oh, I'm okay. She was struggling, of course, but still smiling. And she was like, I have a meeting with someone tomorrow about surrogacy. And I just blurted out that I would have her baby for her. And I was like, wow. I just said that. She's like, she just stopped and her eyes got really big, and I was like I knew this was happening.
This is a house of worship. This is a place of praise, where every demon trembles, where we proclaim your name.
Are having
another baby.
This is a house of healing. Our hearts are full of faith. You have our full
All right. So, here we are. So, it's been a really long journey, but we're 2 weeks away from literally having a baby. And
we are so ready.
Yeah.
I mean, all of us are counting down. We cannot wait. And every single ultrasound we see, I just want to squeeze him. I just cannot wait. And we only have one more appointment, and then it's induction time.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
well, so I think it's important. I think it's important for us to kind of elaborate on our story and kind of tell you a little bit more details about who these wonderful people are. I know that you got to see a glimpse of them, but you want to tell that story?
Yeah, so I kind of talked about it before. Whenever I went into labor with Reese, we had a friend that came in the room, and that was Olivia. And she just provided so much support. I told her everything that was going on, and she just broke down. I mean, I felt terrible, but she was there for us, her and William both, through that process. Even after we got out of the hospital, she's the friend that approached us at church to ask us how we were doing. And at that point, I told her we're going to meet a couple tomorrow that are going through surrogacy, and this is something we're considering.
Yeah.
And it was Olivia that said, well, I'll be your surrogate. I'll carry your baby. And without even talking to William, she offered her heart, and she offered just to help us grow our life, and give us life and this gift of our baby. And so here we are. We went through a lot to get here. We actually had to hire attorneys and drop a contract. We had to write wills. We went through a lot, and that's something you really don't think about whenever you're going into this process. So I went through IVF, and I believe it was August I started that. I did egg retrieval, and then after that we made embryos. We did all of the genetic testing, and then it kind of aligned that we went to court. We had to get approval from the judge to actually implant our embryo in Olivia. And right here's our binder. Baby kitten number 2.
This is everything that we went through.
Yes,
from start to finish.
it starts with Reese's eulogy. And from there on, it was, Reese's diagnosis, all the research with that, all of the genetic testing information, all the contracts we all had to sign. We
bodies of laws that we had to read.
Yes, we had to go through all of these laws to find out like what it takes in the state of Louisiana in order to be a surrogate. And so Olivia also did the research, and we all learned that you have to be a heterosexual couple, married, you have to have at least one living child, and you can't be older than 35, which we were like, okay, we don't know how long this is going to take, and Olivia will actually be 35
In September.
September 4th. So it was honestly all just perfect timing of everything. And when we got the consent and signed order from the judge, we were planning for our first embryo transfer a week later. So if we didn't have that approval, we could not do our first transfer. So a lot had to happen in a little bit of time, but of course the Lord always prepared that, and he made a way for everything to happen the way it did.
100%. And I think another key person in this is William, and just being, of course, Olivia said yes without even talking to William at first.
I think we mentioned the first conversation was, hey, they asked me to be a surrogate, and I was like, nah. But then everything they talked about, everything in this binder, the attorneys and the court stuff, I don't want to say I feel insignificant, but it's really not about me. It's.
But you could say you actually did agree to it eventually.
I did.
Absolutely.
I did agree to it. I went to court.
We definitely needed that.
I wouldn't have done it without
The
you.
order of operations at the court was they talked to Savannah.
They
and
drilled
Mason.
me with questions.
They had questions for Savannah and Mason and Olivia, and then it was like, you're last, and do you understand what you're getting into? Okay, good. And that was it. And I was like, thanks, Judge. That was super easy. But no, it's been an experience. I was actually able to eventually earn Olivia's trust in giving her all the shots.
That was the very first, we get a phone call and they're getting ready to do the shot. And I hear William trying to coach Olivia into it. And Olivia was like, I can't.
I was ready. I was right here.
He was like, I can do this. I was like,
Actually FaceTime.
Yeah.
I just got out of the shower and William's FaceTiming uh-oh.
And Olivia's hyperventilating. Won't allow me to do that.
So we literally loaded up.
We rolled up in pajamas.
And you guys are at your parents.
And we're living.
Yeah. So
it's been one journey after another, and then
100%.
Olivia did shots for a while, so she had a subchorionic hematoma that we were very concerned about, and then she also did progesterone shots to just maintain the pregnancy, and that was fun. So I actually got to give Olivia shots too, and that was an experience. I feel like I'm pretty good at it now. Yeah. I had to get over my fear of doing that, and looking back, she has trusted us through this whole process, even me giving her a shot.
Well, if I could trust William, I could trust Paul. Because he eventually did IM injections, even though I didn't trust him to even give a sub-Q injection in the beginning. But
you did.
He was great at it.
Yeah.
That's great. I should go to med school.
That's a great goal.
I think after this we could all either go to medical school or go become a lawyer or something.
Absolutely.
Because we have all kind of dug our hands into what this whole thing, entailed, and just it encompasses me. Just the whole fact that we had to go to court in order to fight for this. The fact that we had great medical direction, but at the same time it was here's the tools, here you go. And so I think we all felt a great deal of responsibility, and we did have our first transfer, and unfortunately that baby did not take, but we were just so thrilled and excited that I don't even think we said his name yet.
No.
In the film.
I don't think so.
Should we wait?
I don't know. What do you want to do? So we are having another baby boy, though.
Yes,
we're very excited. So we had Reese.
So maybe when he gets here, then we'll say the name. I think that'll be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had Reese, and then our first transfer, we lost that baby, and that was also a boy. And then our second transfer took, like Mason said, and we're having another boy. I always knew I'd be a boy mom, and I'm so ready.
The timeline of every single event that we went through, it was it almost was time stamped to be that way. I mean, from the time that you said yes for the whole process of us grieving to, you know, us going through our first transfer and then losing that baby, second transfer, you guys moving and like literally like starting a new household. I mean, it was fun to be a part of that for us. Like, it was awesome because to me it made us like even more connected in that sense.
We had to kind of come together.
Yeah, my sister came and sat with you a lot.
Yeah.
Madison.
Oh, yeah. Remember she
helped me organize
the
playroom.
entire playroom. That lasted a week.
I can't. That's something I have to work on, like accepting help from people.
Yeah.
So it was hard for me to sit and just watch people do things for me.
Yeah, that's not you at all.
No. I still can't do it. Even at work, it's just like I can't. I'm here to work, you know.
Right.
But I think that's a good like kind of moral of the whole story is like
we
needed help,
right?
Yeah,
right.
And we're kind of the same way. Like we
had to humble ourselves.
We are all the same way. Like we are the helpers, and in this situation, it was like crying out to God, saying, "How can we do this? Like help us!" And then literally just saying yes, and you guys agreeing together and agreeing with us to even do this whole thing.
Right.
So that's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah. So the closing happened on the December 20th, and I don't remember what day we found out we were pregnant.
We did the transfer November 30th and 2 weeks
Okay,
later.
so a few weeks. Well,
10 days.
Kind of knew day 5, pretty much.
Yeah, so we did what you're not supposed to do, and we took an at-home pregnancy, or Olivia took an at-home pregnancy test, and she gave it to us at our favorite place, Lee's Asian Fusion in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And do you know?
Shout out.
Yeah, I carried that pregnancy test with me for a while.
Oh, I don't believe
She didn't even know that, but I did. It stayed in my car, and
mine was in my nightstand, my first one.
Is that sanitary?
Probably not, but I'm teary-eyed thinking about it.
It has a cover.
No, it's great.
You know? And actually, I think it's in this binder right here.
Yeah,
That's
no,
awesome.
It's in the binder.
We carry that
we
with
kept it.
us.
It's a memento.
That's
It
awesome.
is. From the first one you gave us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long it was after the confirmed pregnancy that I started bleeding, but that was just rough because we were at a movie.
Yeah.
And just because any bleeding I've ever had was not, never ended well.
No.
So I was pretty upset about that because it's not only like something happening to me, it's happening to y'all, first and foremost. So yeah, it was scary. And then all the bleeding after that was every time it was just a weight on your shoulders, you know.
Right.
So, but yeah, like I said, it was hard to take help from people, even though it was, you know, something y'all wanted and needed because it's your child, you know.
Right.
So, but that was a struggle for sure, for sure. I would look through Instagrams and look up subchorionic hematomas and just like every symptom, every sign it was going to be okay. And yeah, so it was a tough time, but I'm so glad that's over. The third trimester has probably been the best trimester.
The best and most emotional. And around all that bleeding, and I know we talked about it briefly, but you know, the really happy part of our lives here, we're moving out of my in-laws after 5 months. We're moving into this great house, and doctors like, sit, don't do anything, don't pick up anything. So we had a lot of people, including them and our families, come together and move everything into our new house and make sure that all she had to do was sit in the chair and just point, you know.
Or people put things in the wrong places. And
Yeah,
Right.
it drove her
no, everyone was so
insane.
great. Mason put my handles on in
I
the
did.
kitchen.
I
That made me
did.
really happy.
Yeah, it was
His
a
handles.
good couple of days. Everything was great. Everything was as efficient as can be without, you know, worrying about whether or not you were hurting yourself more. So and still at that point we didn't know I don't think we knew that it was a hematoma yet.
Right.
It was like we were expecting the worst still.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So Olivia called me at like 7 a.m. and
Oh, yeah,
it
that's
was
right.
William's family Christmas.
Yes.
And when I knew she called me that early, I was like, this isn't normal. And I didn't know what to think. I thought, well, did we just lose our baby? You know, did we just lose another sign is really what I thought. And I went and picked her up. We ran to an appointment and we found out she had a bleed. It was pretty bad, but the baby still had a heartbeat. And at that point, everything just kind of started moving in slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
So the bleeding got worse, the hematoma got worse. And they actually said, like, it was, I mean, it went around the entire top and side of the sac of the baby. So typically you only see it in just a little portion above or around the sac, and like hers was circling it. So we really didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And it was, like William said, all hands on deck from our families, just trying to make sure Olivia just had all the help she needed. And yeah, she's definitely a giver and a doer. So that was definitely hard for her and for their family.
Yeah, but I just clung to anything positive. Like Dr. Huber said, about 40% of his IVF babies, you know, have these hematomas. So, and he was just very positive about it. So I felt comfort in that. But, you know, there's always those terrible stories you hear.
And those what ifs.
Right. So, and this was my first time ever doing this, so I gotta do it right.
And obviously, me and Mason have gotten close over the years, but we weren't always that way. You know, we went to high school together, and he was the class president, and I was just a normal dude. And you know, and Mason was more popular than me, I guess you could say.
I didn't know it, or I didn't think it.
Okay.
We really just talked about it.
You know, fast forward a few more years, I married Olivia, and you know, Mason and Olivia and I, we were in adult small groups together at some point, and Savannah eventually trickled in. They got married, and so it just kind of organically happened. You know, we became closer as the years go on. We didn't get close. We got closer because of this, but we didn't get close because of this. We were already at that, you know, great friendship point, and so for it to happen like this, you know, it was really just kind of cool to see just over the years that get to this point.
That, I mean, we could not be more thankful for these two. Like, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be.
This wouldn't be possible without
you know, 2 weeks away from literally bringing in life into this world. That, like, it's just, I don't know. I don't even have the right words to say, but
we don't. There's
thank
nothing we can ever do to thank y'all. You know, you're doing something like I couldn't do for our family, and ultimately, like, you're changing our lives forever.
This is a house of miracles. Come alive in the name of Jesus. Come alive in the name of Jesus. This is a house of miracles.
We're home. My buddy's home. We're so excited. Olivia and William, we just want to say thank you because we couldn't have done this without y'all. We love y'all so much. And we love both of our boys so much.
It's the perfect ending to a awesome story.
It's really just the beginning.
That's right. I love you.
I love you. And we love our boy.